All right, I'm gonna start with a question. Have you ever had an RIP moment? And I'm not talking about a funeral. I'm talking about like a moment when your friend texts to ask you how that really tough chemistry test went, and you simply respond by texting, RIP, bro, meaning it was bad, but it's over and there's nothing you can do about it now. Or maybe your mom found out that you broke curfew and there's no hiding it, there's no faking it, there's no getting out of it, and the last thing you text your friend before you get grounded for life is, I'm RIP. See, technically, RIP means rest in peace. And although, yes, it's usually reserved for people who have passed away, it seems like a phrase more and more people use these days for situations that just feel over and done with. Well, last week we introduced this idea that life is full of changes. Everything should have a note beside it that says subject to change, because it all is. And that's enough to make even the thrill seekers nervous, isn't it? Because we've all seen how change can be a good thing, but we've all probably experienced the negative side as well. Getting a driver's license, getting a girlfriend, getting into a college you want to get into. Those are all good changes, but some changes aren't so great. They definitely deserve an RIP text attached to them. I'll give you an example from my own life. My first car and we were tight, and I loved this car. You may not have a car, you may not like your car. My car wasn't fancy at all, but I loved it. I loved that Volkswagen Jetta. And I kind of lived out in the country, and one day I was going too fast on a gravel road, spun out of control, and ran into a telephone pole. You know, the old classic running into a telephone pole on a gravel road trick. And I looked at my car and realized that my Volkswagen Jetta and I were probably no longer going to be rolling down the road together. You know, and I'm like, well, maybe we can get them fixed. You know, maybe it's not as bad as I thought. Maybe that Jetta just needed a little cosmetic change. So I called my dad, and he offered to come take a look with me the next day. And I still remember standing in the tow truck lot when my dad looked at me and said, you know what, Ben, there's probably no fixing that. It was over. Sure enough, the mechanic said that the car was totaled. I couldn't go back and undo what happened, so I walked out of the parking lot without my Volkswagen Jetta. RIP Volkswagen. Okay, now I know that sounds a little dramatic, but it was really, really disappointing to me at the time. And if I had to guess, I bet you can relate in some situation or another. When life is subject to change, it's only a matter of time before we encounter some disappointments, some letdowns, and some situations that aren't good. They aren't changing back to the way we want them to be. And maybe your RIP moment had to do with school. Maybe you had trouble with a class and you always thought you'd be able to pull it up to a C in the end and pass, but you didn't. The final grade came out and it was over. You failed the class and you're like, RIP chemistry. Maybe your disappointment was a relationship. You were really into somebody and maybe you guys had been together for a while and you even talked about continuing to date after graduation, and then one day he dumped you, or she started dating somebody else, or you found out she wasn't being totally honest about some friends who were actually maybe more than friends, and you kept hoping it wasn't true, but eventually you realized this relationship, RIP, it's over. Maybe your parents went through a divorce and it was really unexpected, and yeah, they'd fought in front of you, but you never imagined that things wouldn't improve, and you certainly didn't see them splitting up. And now you're dividing your time between two houses and your life has changed, and you're like, I think this is permanent, not temporary. And so RIP to the way my family used to look. Maybe an injury ended your sports career, or a fight with somebody ended your friendship, or a redistricting ended your time at your school and put you in another school. A death ended your time with a grandparent, or maybe it's something else entirely. But no matter what it is, all of our situations that include negative change have one thing in common. They feel final. In other words, we understand it's like this story doesn't end with a comma waiting for what's next. It ends with a period, like the end. No more chapters, no next phases. Like this is an RIP moment for us. And the problem with that kind of change is that when our new reality no longer matches what we expected or wanted or hoped for, we can feel completely alone. Like I don't have much opportunity in this area anymore, or alone because this relationship has ended. I feel alone, like I'm just so disappointed with myself or somebody else, and I'm just thinking about it over and over, alone in our disappointment with God, like nobody else feels that way about him like I do. And we look around and we think people can't relate, nobody understands what I'm going through here, and things won't improve in this area, and there's nothing we can do about it, and on we go. It's all just kind of lonely, but it certainly feels final. Now, whether you've been there yet or not, or you're simply afraid that a current situation is headed that way, at some point we all face the question, what do you do when there's nothing you can do? What do you do when there's nothing you can do about the fact that change is happening and it seems pretty final and there's not a lot you can do about it? Well, we're going to look today for a few minutes from the book of Isaiah, a book in the Old Testament of the Bible. And Isaiah was a prophet. He was a person who actually lived, which basically means he heard from God. A prophet heard from God and then communicated those messages to God's people. And Isaiah was a prophet to the people of Judah, which was a section of tribes that had broken off from the kingdom of Israel. So by the time we get to the text we're going to read today, Judah had repeatedly disobeyed God's commandment. So Isaiah now has the unfortunate job of delivering some really, really bad news to the people. And that was this, that they were in danger of being invaded by a hostile country. And apparently their rebellion had some really bad consequences for them. So the future of Judah was subject to change. And it wasn't going to be good. Anytime you're going to be taken captive by another country in some sort of military takeover, it's not going to be good. And all of a sudden, they were going to be in a place where things couldn't go back to the way they were. But in the middle of all these warnings and all of these negative forecasts from Isaiah, God made a remarkable promise through him. So check out what he says, and this is God speaking through Isaiah to his people. When you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you. Now, these are huge promises, especially considering the circumstances the people of Judah were in. God was essentially saying, hey, no matter what has happened or how bad things might get, I will not abandon you. I will not abandon you. Your situation may change, yes, but my love for you certainly will not. Some scholars believe that when ancient writings like this used both fire and water as an illustration, it was a way of demonstrating something was totally destroyed, like totally over. It should have been an RIP case for the people of Judah. But God is saying the opposite. He's saying, no, you will not drown. The flames will not consume you. And we don't use this kind of language a lot, but think of it this way. If you're sitting at a campfire and you toss in a piece of paper, eventually it's burned up, right? It's done. And God is saying to his people, yes, you're going to go through tough stuff. And even though you may feel totally destroyed, you won't be. Your story may look different than you thought, but you won't drown. You won't be consumed by the fire. You'll make it. Why? Because I am with you. And see, the writer doesn't say, if we go through deep water, or if we go through difficulty, or if we walk through flames. No, he says when. Change is going to happen. Bad things are going to happen. Chapters are going to end. But once we reach the end of the story, there's God. He's waiting. You know, he's not going to leave you. And you can remember this, no matter what, God is with you. No matter what, God is with you. In the New Testament, Jesus reaffirmed this truth in the book of John. And John was one of the original 12 followers of Jesus. He was there throughout Jesus' entire ministry. So if anyone would have had insight into the heart of God, it was John. And in John's account of Jesus' life, John records Jesus saying this, here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. Again, Jesus confirms it's not a matter of if. He recognizes we will have troubles. It's inevitable for all of us, but that's not the end of it. He says that even when we experience change, even when we face trials, we can take heart because he has overcome the world. It means that Jesus is greater than anything we'll ever face. He's bigger than any change, bigger than any divorce, breakup, or crisis. And it doesn't mean he'll reverse it. It doesn't mean everything will feel okay or you won't feel tremendous sadness. A broken situation may stay broken forever, but this RIP moment won't define you. You aren't going to be defeated. Yes, you will go through difficult changes and circumstances, but because of Jesus, that's not the way your story ends. Because of his death and resurrection, Jesus has overcome the world, and that includes every trouble you will face. See, when you come back to this verse that John records of Jesus talking, where he says, take heart. Take heart probably isn't a phrase that you use a lot. You don't call your buddy after a football game or after a game-ending fumble and say, yo, take heart, bro. But take heart is actually where we get the word encourage. When you encourage someone, when you cheer them up or you believe in them or you support them, you're actually helping someone take heart instead of losing heart in their situation. So when Jesus told his audience to take heart, it was kind of like he was telling them, hey, encourage yourself or be encouraged. Sure, we've all encouraged our friends, our classmates, maybe even younger siblings, but maybe you've never thought about the idea of encouraging yourself. But this idea is huge when you're facing situations that just feel RIP. So what could that look like? How could we do that? Well, a couple of things. Number one, remind yourself of what's true. That's a great way to encourage yourself. In just 2 passages of scripture we looked at today, we learned that number one, God is with you. We've learned that your story isn't over, that Jesus overcame death, that he can get you through this RIP situation. See, those truths can be powerful for you if you can consistently remind yourself of them. And maybe even take the time to memorize one of the passages in order to encourage yourself when you feel like your story is over. Number 2 is live like it's true. Live like it's true. No matter what's happening in your life, you always have the choice to either trust God or not. But trust isn't just about how you feel. It's about what you do. Here's what I mean. When life is painful, we all tend to, make choices that will hurt us because they're opposite of what God wants for us. Some of us use alcohol or drugs as a way of coping or self-harm, or we hurt others in some way, shape, or form. Out of pain and distrust, we actually create more pain and distrust. So the things that we're going to take away the pain actually create more pain. But it doesn't have to be that way. We're following feelings and emotions, and we don't have to do that in these situations. You can choose to live as if God is with you and he can be trusted, whether you feel that way right now or not. You can choose to make decisions that guard your future because you trust he has a future for you, even though you don't feel good about your situation. You can choose to remind yourself over and over that no matter what, he is with you. And you can live as someone who believes that's true. And see, I get that what we've talked about today, it doesn't seem like it's for everybody. And you may be thinking, hey, life is fine for me right now. And, I can't even think of an RIP situation. That seems to be all you're talking about. I get it. And that's great if you're not going through a situation like that. But the reality is there are people all around you who are going through something potentially more difficult than you could ever realize. And whether you're encouraging them or you're in a difficult situation where you need to encourage yourself, I hope you never forget that God is with you and God is with them no matter what. He may not reverse the situation, but he will walk with you and he will walk with them through it. And because he is there for you and with you, you have more encouragement than you'll ever realize.